all saw her performance in Virginia. We all saw what she's capable of, and
my dog stepped on a bee.
It's not much. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Welcome if you're new, and thank you for joining me, Pluto, your favorite lawyer from the land down under. And in today's video, we're actually going to discuss a case that took place in the land down under back in 2016. Now, this isn't a new topic on this channel if you've been here for a while. In fact, I remember covering the news that the Australian government was investigating Amber Heard for perjury in connection to her dog smuggling incident as soon as it was announced back in October of 2020. The video that I made back then will be linked in the description box if you're interested. It's quite comprehensive and still very much up to date, except for a bit of an update, which I will be adding at the end of this video. So it was actually after perusing the unsealed documents that we all have access to thanks to Andrea Burkhart, an amazing lawyer who I actually have the privilege of counting as a Twitter friend, an online friend for the past 2 years now, over 2 years. She now has a YouTube channel as well. It's been up for a few months and it's linked in the description box. So please go ahead and tell her that Pluto says hi, although she's a pretty big deal in the community, so I doubt you need an introduction from little old me. I'll also be linking her website in which you can find access to all of these documents if you want to read them in your own time. So, like many others, I mistakenly believed until I found the transcripts of the hearing in which Amber Heard was sentenced, it was barely a sentence, that her conviction was actually recorded. But it turns out that it wasn't. And if you think it's because of corruption, just hang on a second and let me explain why. She pleaded guilty to a charge of falsifying documents. Now, she made a deal with the prosecution to drop the other 2 charges of smuggling in her dogs if she pleaded guilty to the falsifying charge, which is exactly what ended up happening. So it was just that one count that was being looked at by the court and not the actual smuggling charges. I've already gone through all the details of this case in the video that I made back in October of 2020. So again, feel free to watch it if you haven't. But to summarize, she lied through her teeth, and that's why the court let her off so lightly. It wasn't necessarily biased, although I have to say, from reading the transcripts, I did detect some kind of, I suppose, favoritism or maybe some leniency because she was an actress, a high-profile celebrity, a jet setter who has too much to take care of and too much to consider. And so that's why she left the issue of her dogs to her staff. The judge bought that story. It's unfortunate, but we have to remember that all of the evidence that emanated out of the UK libel case, namely Kevin Murphy and Kay James's testimony and witness statements, wasn't available to the judge in the Southport Magistrates Court back in April of 2016. And so once it came to light, the investigation in Australia was opened. At least the Australian authorities are taking their law seriously, and hopefully they'll take the offense of perjury seriously for once, because I've said this before on the channel, it's a very under-prosecuted charge due to the fact that it takes a lot of evidence to prove perjury most of the time. It's a criminal offense, and so the standard of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. Unfortunately, more times than not, the prosecution don't believe that they have the requisite amount of evidence to meet this standard before a jury. And so, lies are left unprosecuted. This case, however, is far from that predicament. Thanks to Kevin Murphy and Kay James, we have a vast amount of evidence that proves, beyond a reasonable doubt if you ask me, but it's going to be up to a jury if it even gets to that point, that Amber Heard knowingly lied during the Australian court proceedings in 2016, thereby committing perjury and obstructing the course of justice. Now, let's circle back to why the judge decided to be quite lenient and not record her conviction. There's a section in the Crimes Act. Now, this is the Commonwealth Crimes Act, not the New South Wales one. Many people get those two confused. The Commonwealth Act is a federal piece of legislation because Amber was prosecuted for violating the Biosecurities Act, which is a federal legislation. It applies to Australia as a whole rather than per state. The relevant section considered by the judge in deciding not to record her conviction is Section 19B. This section essentially states that the court can consider a number of things, including a person's age, mental condition, their character. So for example, the way they're behaving, even in court, are they showing remorse? Have they been cooperating? Did they plead guilty? Has there been any good character evidence presented to mitigate what they've done, in addition to the nature of the crime itself, so whether it was trivial or non-trivial, and whether it was committed under extenuating circumstances, meaning that were the actions of the person justifiable considering the circumstances. So the court takes all of that into consideration, in addition to the expediency, so the practicality, the convenience of actually punishing the person for what they did. So it's like a balancing act. Is it worth punishing them? Does it make sense considering what they've done and any mitigating factors? If this section is satisfied, according to the court, then the court can decide not to record the conviction, which is what ended up happening in this instance. During the hearing, good character evidence was presented on behalf of Amber Heard, namely focusing on her charitable endeavors. Apparently, she's been quite charitable since she was a teenager. Many people say that was probably community service for the crimes that she committed as a juvenile. I don't know. I can't prove that. But I do know that she was arrested as far back as 2003, I believe, which would make her 16, 17. So yeah, a minor. But to get back to the point, there was good character evidence presented, which the judge found credible, cogent, it was taken into account. In terms of the seriousness of the offense itself, the judge conceded that it was not a trivial offense and that it was actually quite serious. I've said this before on the channel when covering this topic. Australia has very strict biosecurity laws, quarantine laws, etc., because it's an isolated island essentially with its own flora and fauna, and it's very integral to keep any foreign diseases, germs, bacteria out of Australia, which, by the way, Australia has been quite successful in doing. There are many diseases that exist everywhere else in the world that Australia has been spared from. Now, as for extenuating circumstances, Amber's defense submitted that she didn't know, so her mistaken belief that she wasn't required to declare the dogs, and this belief was based on her previous experience in traveling with her dogs, and also her belief that her staff had dealt with all of the documentation required for the dogs. The judge seemed to buy this. Again, let's remember here, the evidence was limited, and everything we now know, thanks to Kevin Murphy, Kay James, and the libel case in general, was not known at the time. So the judge agreed. She does a lot of travel. She always relies on her staff to arrange for her dogs, and this situation or this instance was no different. And so the judge believed that she mistakenly believed that her staff took care of the arrangements for her dogs. Now, we know, of course, that there is ample evidence to contradict this lie, I can now say, because this woman is a proven liar. Amongst this evidence to combat her lies is an email that Amber sent Kay James back in September of 2013 in connection to a separate incident where she wanted to illegally smuggle her dogs into the Bahamas, I believe. And I think she was successful in doing so as well. She asked Kay James to grease the vet, essentially forging documentation, I suppose, of, her dog's vaccinations and whatnot. Now, granted, this wasn't in connection to the Australian dog smuggling incident, but it's important to note that one of the mitigating factors that the judge considered is the fact that she'd never done this before. Well, that's not a fact now, is it? Because we know that she did, thanks to Kay James. Kevin Murphy also provided testimony that she essentially blackmailed him into lying for her, into committing perjury, and she also tried to get him to convince Kay James to do the same. He refused to do the latter, and Amber herself thought that, maybe it's not a good idea because she was worried that Kay James would tell the truth. The judge also found that she was remorseful, highly cooperative, and did plead guilty after all. These were all considered as mitigating factors, and so, ultimately, that led to the judge's decision to proceed under Section 19B and not record her conviction. Little did the judge know that she would then use this entire case as a joke, naming her dog Barnaby Joyce after the politician who is very much still, against her and very much pro getting her extradited here and having her face the music for committing perjury. Proceeded to post photos on the internet with her dog in her bag or something of the sort, going, I'm smuggling my dog again. So basically making a farce out of this whole incident. Given that the judge stated that they had no doubt that this has impacted Amber and that she would never do this again, I do wonder what the judge has to think about that. now that all of this evidence is out there and her antics are out there as well. Don't forget, she started making a mockery of this whole thing way before the libel trial, way before any of the truth came out. Because in her delusion, in her conviction that she was above the law and has once again gotten away with it unscathed, she was openly making a mockery of the whole situation. Now, I did say in the beginning that I had a bit of an update to add to my 2020 video. The FBI, the US authorities in general, and witnesses in the US, international witnesses, are indeed cooperating with the Australian authorities, providing them with evidence to further this perjury investigation. This has been confirmed by the Australian government to Ms. Paris Karamitsos, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, where they confirm that indeed the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry have recently obtained the support of Commonwealth and other overseas law enforcement agencies and advise that witness statements from the US have been obtained. They state that committing perjury in support of a breach of Australia's biosecurity requirements is seen as a serious breach. The official also stated that he couldn't comment further as the matter is an ongoing investigation. So there you have it. This investigation, I am very happy to say, is indeed proceeding. I don't know where it's gonna end. I'm hoping that she's at least going to get charged. I doubt she's going to voluntarily come here. I could be wrong, I just don't see her doing it. In terms of extradition, I've mentioned in my 2020 video and in recent podcasts and other videos that she is definitely prone to being extradited under Article 2 of the extradition treaty between the US and Australia because perjury is listed as an extraditable offense. So it's up to the US to agree to send her over, to hand her over. Now, as for jail time or prison time, I am not certain whether that's going to take place. You'll notice in Section 19B the use of the word expedient, expediency, efficiency, convenience. So housing someone in prison takes up taxpayer money, of course, and these things are considered. So whether they're actually going to want to waste Australians' taxpayers' money, and I'm sure a lot of Australians, including myself, are like, go ahead, waste it. Waste it. It's not even a waste. Put her where she belongs, essentially. And if my money has to go to it, I vote yes. But it's not just up to me, of course. So Australians, let me know what you think. But in general, these things are, considered with practicality in mind. And sometimes they might just decide to slap her with a really hefty fine and a conviction this time. I'm personally hoping that she is made to face the music in one way or the other because these types of individuals are deranged, they're dangerous, and they will not stop until they're either dead or they're behind bars. They can't even feel remorse. It's funny how the judge mentioned she was remorseful. I'm sure she's put on an act. I'm surprised the judge fell for it. I do wonder whether that was a little bit of, she's a woman, she's harmless, she didn't mean anything by it, conventionally attractive, etc., etc. But we all saw her performance in Virginia. We all saw what she's capable of, and
My dog stepped on a bee.
It's not much. I'm sure everyone agrees when I say that I just want to see justice being served. I just want to see people being held to account for their actions, people being held to be responsible for their wrongdoing. Otherwise, what's the point of the law? As a young lawyer myself, I have witnessed criminals walk out smiling, laughing out of a courtroom, and they go on and sometimes do even worse things. But that's it for this video. I hope you found it informative. I hope you now understand why her conviction wasn't recorded. It's not that I'm an Australian lawyer, that I'm defending the Australian process. I think, in fact, Australia, by opening an investigation after the UK libel case and by continuing it to this day, they're doing a great job. They're sending out a message that it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what gender, if you're a celebrity, if you're beautiful, if you're young, if you break our laws and if you commit perjury and obstruct the course of justice, you will be held to account for it. And I really hope they see it through. And I hope that if they don't, it's because of some kind of an extradition technicality, or she essentially makes herself unavailable. She disappears. But all in all, I'm proud. I'm proud of Australia. I'm proud of the fact that they're seeing this through and they're taking it seriously, unlike, unfortunately, Mr. Justice Nicol in the UK. I do wonder what he thinks now that the Virginia trial has played out. I'm lying. I don't care what he thinks. Thank you all so much for joining me today. Take care, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.